Hello and welcome to today's Friday Focus, where we focus on the news, some reviews, and the juicy rumors in the photo industry. While we are on this roller coaster ride, do me a favor and let us know where you're joining from. Hello, all you party animals. We are just about 2 minutes away from getting started. Let us know where you're joining from. Want to know how far this live stream makes it. Hello and welcome to another edition. I was going to say the next edition, but it is a new edition of the Friday Focus. Welcome, welcome, welcome. Thank you so much for joining us today. Really, really appreciate it. And let's go ahead and get our dashing co-host in here as well. Hello, Mr. Robo. How are we doing today?
I'm doing very well. A lot of Canon news to cover.
Oh my gosh, I'm like over here just trying to stay awake because the last couple days have just been a crazy just release cycle, just a ton of new news and information. And like you said, Canon really dominated the news cycle this week. But we did some digging and we found some other fantastic news as well. So this is not just going to be a Canon R show. There's plenty of other things to cover. So let's go ahead and say hello to some people that are joining us. Hello, Les. You are looking forward to the rain. So I am too, for the only reason that I'm, stuck inside working today. So if it's raining outside, I have no desire to go out and shoot and photograph and, be outside. So I'm totally cool with the rain as well. And then Mav fan number 1 is also joining us. So hello, Mav fan from Texas. Thank you so much for joining us. It means the world that you guys tune in on Fridays at noon to find out what's going on in this crazy photography world. So let's go ahead and jump right into it. We are into the Friday Focus, but before we get started, I wanted to let you know that we are dropping a new episode of the Talking Pixels podcast this afternoon, in which we're going to talk about strategic planning in your business. And to me, my career has been mostly in IT before coming here, but a lot of it dealt with, setting strategic plans for school districts, for businesses, for all different things. And strategic planning is something that is super important. So in this episode, we share kind of how to build a strong base through strategic planning in your business. So that will be launching this afternoon. And you can find it by just doing a search for the Talking Pixels podcast in any of your favorite podcatchers. And if it's not showing up, just let us know. We'll put it wherever we can to get it out there to you guys. Also, we are going to be going pod crazy. This will also become a podcast very soon. So if you don't, join in at noon every Friday, just note that you'll be able to add it to your podcatcher and you'll be able to listen to it whenever it's convenient for you. So just some housekeeping notes. We are open here at the store from 10 to 7 Monday through Friday, and we are closed. Oh, no, we are actually open this Saturday. That was our leftover slide, so I apologize for that. We are open this Saturday from 10 till 6. So if you need absolutely anything, we are here to serve you. We are here to help you out and make sure that, if you need to rent anything, if you need to, last minute photo shoot coming up, just let us know. And if you do come in store, kind of what to expect. Well, first and foremost, we are making sure that everybody is wearing their masks. Lorain County is now mandatory. So we've actually kind of mandated masks throughout the whole thing, as people come in the store. But we are doing our due diligence and making sure everything's disinfected, door handles are wiped down, cameras are wiped down. We are trying to do our best to make sure that you are comfortable. And if you don't want to come in, that's totally fine. We do have curbside pickup available as well as shipping on thousands of items on our website. So what are our goals for today? Number 1 is to update you on the photography related news that you might have missed. There's been a lot of crazy things going on in the news, a lot of debates on who knows what. My goal is to pull you kind of away from that and update you on the news that is going on in this industry, in the photo industry, industry that we all know and love, and just kind of keep you up to speed. Also, selfishly, I want to pull you away from the fear, uncertainty, and doubt, the FUD that's going on of the things that are beyond our control. And photography is kind of in our control. We can go get pick up our camera and get lost for an afternoon and not think of anything, or, learn something new, a skill that's new, or even just stay up to date on what's going on in the industry, even if it is for just an hour where, Mike and I just kind of talk about what's going on in the industry. And then finally get you motivated to try something new. And that's where the magic happens, is when, like today, we're going to talk about shooting underwater photography. Maybe this weekend, instead of just splashing around or laying out at the pool, maybe you try taking some cool portraits in the pool. And we're going to talk about that a little bit later. But first, let's jump into the news. So, wow. I mean, I don't really think there's any other way to say, kind of sum up Canon's announcements other than, wow, there was so much going on in this announcement. I think it's also probably the worst kept secret in the industry, because we knew almost everything. But Canon took a very interesting approach this time, in that they kind of seeded a lot of the information slowly. And honestly, like coming from a marketing guy, like they did it pretty well. I mean, they made sure that they stayed, in the news for the last several months. They had the camera on display. I believe at WPPI. So, they did a good job with this announcement as far as getting people excited. And honestly, the pre-orders at the store have been crazy. There's a lot of excitement around these products. But, what are your thoughts? I mean, last week you said you didn't think you would be this excited for a camera that you're not going to get, but it sounds like that might have changed a little bit.
Oh, the as we will discuss later, the gear acquisition syndrome is strong with this one. I mean, it's felt like for the last few years that Canon has been letting Sony push the industry forward, and Canon has been dragged along unwillingly with them. These are a couple of really strong camera releases, and I'm amazed that they have gone from basically trailing to out in front and pushing everybody else in the industry all of a sudden.
And it's
This
not a
is a
short version
really,
either.
yeah, no, the specs on that R5, 8K video, 45 megapixel sensor, those are pretty impressive. And admittedly, it was all from Canon Legends of Light and Canon influencers, so they weren't going to say anything terrible about it. But the people on that live stream yesterday from Canon who were actually using these cameras, the real photographers, seemed really excited about them. The eye autofocus with these great new lenses that the RF system has, it was just impressive what they seem to be able to do with it.
Yeah, and it looks like it's the new dual AF dual pixel autofocus 2. So that's the same autofocus system that we saw in the 1DX Mark III, and that's what I was watching. I think it was DP Review. They talked about how just good it is. I mean, it just locks on. And they said even with the 1DX3, they found themselves not using the optical viewfinder because they wanted that new faster autofocus that was available in the live view. So, it'll be exciting when these, we get hands on these cameras. We're currently working on, a hands-on event here at the store, and more news about that'll be, coming soon. But I'm really excited to get hands on this. And like you had mentioned, nobody said anything negative. I honestly, people did, and I want to just kind of pause for a minute and just kind of give a nod to Canon for not holding this information back. In that, there's a lot of talk about overheating in these cameras, like right from the launch, and like you even just kind of like sighed a little bit. But to me, I respect Canon for not holding that back and trying to hide and say there's not a problem, because there is a little bit of overheating issue. But like Peter McKinnon said in his video, like it's within reason. Like you're shooting 8K, you're shooting raw. Chances are you don't even have cards big enough right now that can even hit that, overheating point. But, it's something that Canon's not saying is not an issue. They're not hiding. They're right off the get-go, like you're recording a ton of data and it's going to heat up. There's a lot of data that's being processed. So I have to give them a nod for that. Because they didn't hold it back, and they're just putting it out there and setting those expectations right away.
Yeah,
So,
the amount of data that 8K RAW uses, I'm looking up the number to make sure I get it right. 18.67 gigabytes per minute.
right.
So if you have a 256 gigabyte card, it fills up in 13 minutes. If you have a 60 gigabyte card, you can shoot 7, maybe 8 minutes of video, and then it's full. So I'm not quite sure who needs 8K. I mean, I know the obvious answer is, people who work on Hollywood productions and that level of work need 8K. But I love the quote from Jordan Drake of DP Review TV, where he said, "I don't need more Ks. My laptop's going to catch on fire if I try to process one of these things." And I think for most of us normal mortals, that's the 4K capabilities of this camera are probably more important, where because it's shooting 8K, it will downsample to 4K perfectly. It's exactly doubled. So it should have one of the highest quality 4K outputs out there.
And I'm excited for the 4K 120. I mean, 4K 60, in the, mirrorless line, the no crop. I mean, they did so many things right with the R5. The R6 does have a little bit of crop. It's like 1.07, which even at that point, like compared to the previous Canons, that's not bad. That 1.07 crop is not bad at all, in my opinion.
Yeah.
In previous cameras, it was like 1.5 times, 1.7, 1.6 times. And, you're going to have to get super wide lenses if you're going to, have take into consideration with this crop. But, with these two cameras, they're knocking it out of the park. And they did a lot of other things right too, like the batteries, for example. Yes, they announced a new battery, but your old batteries work. And those batteries have been around since, I shot the original 7D and it's that same battery. So, they've been around for a really long time, but the new ones do have, 14% more battery life. And, they did a lot of things right. I think they
Yeah.
listened to
For
their
that new
users. They got rid of
battery,
the hokey little, what's that?
my understanding, if I read what was said in the press release properly, it's the same watt hours in the battery. So the battery has the same size. It's just they have changed the electronics in the battery and they work with the new cameras so that they can get that extra 14% of life, which I thought was fascinating that they're able to change battery electronics to get
Right. A
that
lot of
extra
people
bonus.
or a lot of their companies, they'll just come out with a new battery and say, yeah, it's just a new
Right.
battery, like figure it out. And now it's, it's just a little bit easier. When I was shooting weddings, when I was shooting Canon weddings specifically, I had 8 of those batteries because I had, 2 in each grip and I wanted to make sure, and I was carrying 2 batteries plus my backup. So 8 times, you're spending $60, $70 on a battery when you're looking at making that switch to a new system. Like something as small as a battery can help affect that. So Canon has just kind of pulled out the stops there. They pulled out the stops with their awesome adapter. So now you can use all your glass and come over. Menus are very similar. They brought the joystick back. So again, very comfortable. You're not having to learn how to use their little, touchpad like in the EOS R. And, like I said, I think they listened to their users. They were very forward thinking with this. They paused and waited and they watched the market and they waited till the right time and now they're pouncing. So I think it's awesome that they're doing a good job with these cameras and they're not just, putting out an R2. Like they're really making a statement with these cameras. So I do want to jump over to our comments really quick. So hello from Twinsburg, Mr. David. Hope you are doing well as well. And then we did have a couple comments come in. Camera gear is getting super expensive, especially the lenses. I do want to circle back to that. And I heard 8K can shoot in RAW, but 4K doesn't allow RAW. Is that true? I did not see that. I thought that the RAW
I
was.
think that is true, but I can't say for sure. I was looking at a spec chart comparing them yesterday, and I am pretty sure that it is only RAW in 8K and that they're using one of their compression codecs in 4K. But I would still like to look that up before I said absolutely 100% for sure.
And that was one thing too that I noticed. A lot of this is pre-production. We're going to see the R5 within the next month or so, and then the R6 after that. So everything that we're seeing online tends to be pre-production, and there still can be firmware updates that come out before, and different compression, different codecs. Those are all things that can be fine-tuned and updated before the release. So it'll be cool to see if they do add any more features or if they work on the thermaling issues ahead of time. So this comment that came out, camera gear is getting super expensive, especially the lenses. And I agree. So they're at an interesting point with some of their lenses where they are at that kind of top tier as far as price. But as far as, the cameras that are coming out, they're a little bit more expensive. And I think you had kind of a thought on the R6 in particular. You were thinking it was going to be more around that $2,000 mark, right?
Right. Yeah. I pictured the R6 as the Sony A7 III killer. And it seems like a very good, very competitive camera. But I also pictured it coming in more at the slightly below 2000, $1999 to get that price point below 2000 that the A7 III came out with, that the Nikon Z6 is at. So I was a little surprised that Canon has, that it was $2,500 for that body. I'm guessing it's for, to collect that extra money from people who have a pent up demand for the new Canon mirrorless, and Canon often discounts. I have a feeling in the future that price is going to come down to below that $2,000 mark as a rebate often. But I don't know. We are going through the global pandemic, and these companies do need to keep making money if they're going to keep making cameras. So maybe they need that price to be able to sell it.
And it was just confirmed no 4K RAW by
Okay.
we'll call him show director of IT and fact checking Eeyore said no 4K RAW on that one.
Friend of the show, Eeyore.
Yes, yes. So we appreciate that help. So no 4K RAW coming. There was a point that I was going to make. Oh, so we also have to realize that this is not the only, these are not the only two cameras in the EOS R line. So as we're looking at, good, better, best, or other options, I mean, you still have the RP, which is that budget friendly. You have the EOS
Mhm.
R. Now, will that stay in the lineup? I don't know. I mean, I feel like that's at that $2,000 and less, kind of range. And then you have the R6 and then the R5. So it'll be interesting to see what they do with the EOS R. I think the RP is always going to be at that kind of entry level mark, which it's not a bad camera at all. It's for the price for getting into full frame, it's great for what it is. But it'll be interesting to see what they do with the EOS R. That's the one that it's going to be. Was that just a test the waters, and then we're going to you know we figured out everything we needed to, and we're going to discontinue it, or they're going to hold it around for a while. That's the one that'll be interesting to kind of keep an eye on.
Yeah, it just feels to me like the R was the trial run for the R6. And there isn't going to be an R, I don't know, R2, RS. I don't know where you would go with it, but
And I think I
it
could
just
see us
seems
doing
like
like
it's
an
done.
RP Mark II, or
Yeah.
and also, what
Now
does
the
this do to their traditional
RP,
line?
yeah, the RP, I do think they're going to keep going. It feels like that is their equivalent of the full frame Rebel, and I feel like that's the one where they're going to keep trying to drive the price lower and lower. What this does to their traditional line, I mean, I have been a mirrorless shooter since 2014, I think, when I switched to Fuji and Pentax and Sony along the way. So I've shot a lot of the mirrorless systems out there just because I love the advantages of it. Live view, being able to see, I'm pointing at my rear screen, being able to see live what's actually going to be in the picture, it just changed the way I shoot. And I think Sony's traditional users, I think they're going to keep supporting them because there is so many EF lenses out there. There's so many of the old bodies that have the EF mount out there. But I'm sorry, did I say Sony? Canon. Canon is showing that this is the way forward for them, that the EF mount is now obsolete as far as they're concerned, and they're going to stop developing for it, and they've thrown their weight behind this RF mount. And I think that's a good thing. I think that's where they need to go to essentially be the major competitor to Sony. Sony has been coming on really hard, and this is the first time anybody's come out with something that makes me sit back and say, whoa, Sony does not have the best mirrorless camera out there anymore. The R5 is clearly it.
Yep, this is more than a shot across the bow, for sure.
Right.
So what else? Let's see what else was talked about too, because this is what I'm probably going to not say this name right. Torbjorn. I'm sorry. I do want to apologize. But the 100 to 500 price compared to other brands is insane. At least here in Sweden. In Sweden, the RF 100 500 is going to be 36.26, and here, in the US, I believe it's like 26.99. Is where that price is going to be coming in. Yeah, the Canon 100 500 is 26.99. It's an L lens, and Sony's closest G Master, which is just $200 less. So it's not that different. So I think there is a difference here that we do bring up, and that is between the US market and the Swedish market. Because here, you have the 100 to 400, which is the G Master, which, like he says here, it's only a couple $100 less. But you also have the Sigma coming in as well, which is giving a lower priced alternative. And that brings up, I don't want this to be a Canon show, but it also brings up the fact how long before Tamron and Sigma now take this seriously and see that RF is going to be here for a while, and it's something that they can find as far as a profit center. People are going to buy these cameras. They are buying these cameras. So, are we going to start seeing more announcements like the 100 to 400, like we saw on the E mount, coming over to the RF mount? So that way users do have, a little more inexpensive alternative to the RF glass.
Yeah, and I think that is the advantage and the disadvantage to the RF mount. Because it is so much bigger, they can do these amazing lenses like the f2 28-70, like the f1.2 lenses, be easier. But they need bigger glass for that bigger mount, and bigger glass is expensive,
Sure.
and more glass is expensive. And Canon in particular has been leaning on the higher end of their line. We're going to get to the lenses in a second, and I think there's some good news as far as price is concerned in some of them, but the lenses that they've been showing are meant to be fantastic professional lenses at a cost that a professional would pay. They are noticeably more expensive than other lenses in their class, but I think part of that is because they're higher quality because of those larger elements that they have to use for the RF mount.
Yeah, and I don't think, I mean, Canon's always knocked it out of the park as far as glass. I mean, that's why it's one of the most widely used mounts and most wisely used mounts on camera sides. Like when I worked at Panasonic, we had a camera in the line that actually had an EF mount. You see it in Hollywood all the time, especially with all the
Mm-hmm.
cinema primes and stuff. I mean, the design, the optical, the optical design of that mount paired with the glass. I mean, it's just all really, really good glass. And they kind of extended, like you had mentioned. Right now, the only really affordable lens in the lineup is that 35, their macro lens. I believe it's 35, 30 or 35,
Right.
35 macro. And they've added a couple more lenses that are a little more. I don't want to say consumer focused because I don't feel like the new f11 lenses are consumer lenses, but they kind of are in the fact that they're not going to be super expensive, especially for what they offer. So I'm going to let you talk a little bit about the lenses because you seem to be excited about these. So I'll let you go ahead and share with us what the lens announcements were.
Right. So the one that I'm most fascinated by are the 600 f11 and the 800 f11 with their it is a fixed f11 lens, no adjustments, and it is collapsible. So when you look at it, it's kind of like an old telescope like you would see in a pirate movie where you pop it out to look through it, and it's a straight tube, f11 all the way through. And it's $699 US for the 600 millimeter and $899 US for the 800 millimeter, which is an incredibly low price for that range. I can't recall ever seeing an 800 millimeter lens. Well, I can't remember seeing an 800 millimeter lens too often, but for $899, it's a fantastic price point. But my question is the trade-off of that fixed f11? That's not very bright, and I've had problems in the past with lenses focusing when they're stopped down that much, especially if I'm trying to shoot wildlife. But on the live stream, the wildlife photographer said they were working great for him. But
And
I also then start to wonder about, well, what about, in ideal conditions? Okay. But what about if it's, it's dark, you're trying to shoot a bird in a dark, forest, it's a little overcast. Is it still going to get it? But then I think it's $899 for an 800 millimeter lens. And that's cheap enough that my gear acquisition syndrome is flaring up. And I'm saying, well, if I get the R6 plus that lens, that's cheaper than most 300 f2.8s are. Yeah, I could get a whole birding photography kit for a pretty good price. And then I remember that I'm a Fuji shooter and this is insane and I need to back away from the credit card.
exactly. But I think, I mean, as we're sitting here talking about it, another good point, at least the 600 f11 is cheap. And are they trying to compete with Micro Four Thirds? I think so. So if let's just break it down, like not take the R5 and the R6 out of it. Let's talk about the EOS RP for a moment. Okay, so
Right.
we're getting now this and the 600 for under $2,000. So
Yep.
now we have a true 600 millimeter. Even if you throw the teleconverter in there, you're getting so much more. And F11, like you said, on a bright sunny day, it's not going to be bad. And with, if you are talking about the R5, R6, the low light performance of that full frame sensor, and even the RP, I mean, it's a full frame sensor, so you're going to let
Yep.
a lot of light in. I don't think it's going to be a bad experience at all. I think that Canon did their homework with this lens. I think they did their due diligence for testing, and I think that we're going to be surprised. I mean, this is the first time that we've seen something like this, on the market. And just again, kudos to Canon for trying something new, trying something different, and
Yep.
establishing kind of a new standard of it's okay to put out an f11 lens because it solves a problem. You don't have number one, you're going to put this tool in more people's hands. It's smaller, it's lighter weight, it's compact. They solved that problem that a lot of wildlife shooters had. And also, we were talking a little bit earlier about, wildlife video and how, F11's really not that big a deal to people that are shooting video. And I could see a whole crowd of people that would be in love with this lens, especially when you're pairing it with your 4K 120s or your 4K 60s, with actually being able to see how these birds interact or how that wildlife interacts. I just think it's going to be, another tool that's easy to carry along in the toolbox.
Right. And I think the other point I want to make about this is I think the F11 fixed lenses and the 100 to 500 with its 7.1 aperture on the wide end, I think Canon is saying something about these new sensors, particularly in the R6. I think they're saying, we think these sensors are so much better at high ISOs that you can get away with higher apertures. Maybe as a professional sports photographer, you wouldn't want to, but if you're an enthusiastic amateur, why not? And especially when you can get these kind of lenses this cheap. The 100 to 500, as Torbjorn said, sorry, again, apologies on my pronunciation. It is pricey compared to other ones in that class, but it's about within 500, and it is an L lens. So Canon has always charged a pretty penny for it. I'm a tech guy, so I'm used to talking about the Apple tax where you have to pay extra for it. It feels like we've got the Canon tax going here. But in their defense, this is some high quality stuff. I don't think they should be ashamed about charging a little more for it.
Absolutely.
And speaking about charging less for it, let's talk about that 85 millimeter macro, because this is the other lens that really tempts me, because I shoot with my Fujis in an 85 millimeter equivalent, more or less, for my food photography every day. And one of my complaints about the Fuji high aperture lenses, the f1.2 56 millimeter, which is the 85 equivalent, is it doesn't focus that close. And I'm always struggling when I use it to try to get back far enough that I can actually get what I need taken a picture, to get it to focus on what I need it to focus on. And this lens is another one that's like, oh, this is kind of tempting. Maybe I should go get that R6 and back away from the credit card. It also looks like, with image stabilization in it, it's a pretty good, cheap portrait lens. If you get one of these, you don't have to go out and buy their insane 85, I think it's f1.2 or f1.4, that huge Eye of Sauron kind of glass. You can get this with an RP and have a decent, inexpensive run and gun portrait setup. But I'm not the professional portrait photographer on the podcast. So TJ, what do you think about that?
So I think the F2, I look back to doing, for 2 years, maybe even a little bit longer, actually about 3 years, I shot micro four thirds for weddings, seniors, portraits of all kinds, headshots. So I was shooting with a, micro four thirds sensor, and I was shooting, F2 1.8 lenses on micro four thirds. So I'm not worried at all about F2 on, the EOS R system. And I'm especially excited for the small compactness, because especially with my seniors, we were, walking around buildings, we were going out on piers, we were, sometimes hiking to locations. So for me to carry that big 85, I probably wouldn't take it with me. I would lean on, the smaller, lighter weight lenses. And that's where I think this 85 is going to fit in really well. Handheld portrait lenses, and I have no problem with that F2 personally, as a portrait shooter.
Good.
So I think that wraps it. There was so much to cover in the Canon announcements, but again, we don't want to.
I just want to throw out there the teleconverters, the 1.4x and the 2x. If you put a 2x teleconverter on that 800 lens, you've got a 1600 f22. And that is, I think, almost literally a telescope. So if you're into astrophotography, that feels tempting. But it also begs the question, where are Canon's professional long telephoto lenses, like the 300 f2.8, the 600 f4, the kind of things that you would see at a professional sporting event? Admittedly, I have to think, with the Olympics being shut down and the Olympics being maybe in Tokyo this year, a lot of these camera companies that were going to showcase their new stuff there have pushed it off.
Right.
But yeah, it just feels like, there's another shoe to drop here with those teleconverters.
I think so. 100%. I think it's a matter of time before we start seeing more of the glass coming out, from Canon, the longer pro stuff for the sidelines for sure. Okay, so there were a couple other announcements. The battery grip. Also, there's a $1,000 battery grip that came out that allows you to FTP and have dedicated wireless for transfer. So again, I think that's going to be kind of a niche product, just like the new printer. They took a lot of the things from their Pro, I believe the Pro 1000 series, made it smaller. So those large format printers are exactly that. They're huge. And so Canon's kind of just iterating and making them a little bit smaller and a little bit more affordable. So that was some of the other announcements as well. So moving on from there, if anybody has any other comments about the Canon announcements, let us know. Are you excited for these? Is this something that you're going to pick up? We love to hear, we do this to also hear from users. So definitely let us know if it's something you're excited about. So another large lens, actually not really so large in that big bulbous, front end element. But this is the new 12-24 G Master from Sony. So this is the lightweight. I think they say it's the widest, smallest lens for full frame available. So, they were going for that compact, that promise that, we were brought to the mirrorless promised land was that smaller, lighter weight system. And that's what Sony kind of did here is, 12-24 has 2.8. But there is, and I think you wanted to talk these kind of that big front element on the front and kind of what they did to combat that.
Right. Yeah. Speaking of the Eye of Sauron, I mean, just look at that thing in the picture and how much it sticks out of the lens. And you have to do that to get the f2.8 at 12 millimeters. And my understanding is nobody else has f2.8 at 12 millimeters in a zoom. This is a unique lens. I think there's a rumor that Canon's going to have something similar for the RF mount eventually, but it hasn't been officially announced or even unofficially announced. Like TJ was saying about all the stuff we just talked about, where there have been rumors, pretty strong rumors, leaks. Canon hasn't had that. So Sony has a very unique lens here. If you are into architecture or you are into landscape, this could be something to look at. The thing about that glass is it's Sony's XA Extreme aspherical, which means it's not round. It's not a lens shape. It actually has changes into it. And I think what they're doing is they're putting two different elements together to help it bend so that it is much sharper in the corners. You don't have the diffraction when the light is coming in at an angle. They have bent the curve so it's not perfectly round. I'm sorry for all the hand gestures I'm making to try to show this, but it's not just a curve. It has got changes to it. And that's just the fact that you can do that with a lens fascinates me.
Absolutely. And they, another thing that was interesting with this lens is the fact that it does have the slide-in filters for the rear element. So the problem with lenses like this,
slide in exactly.
What is it? Pop in?
It's not slide in. It is a, here, let me see if I can bring this picture up.
The film out is how I understood it.
Oh yeah, I guess you're right. It is slide in, but I think of like some of the big, the Sony RF to EF adapter that has drop-in filters. That's what I'm thinking of, is like a rear drop-in adapter. This is
so this doesn't. It's not on the element like you're thinking like the drop-in, or I guess you're thinking what I'm thinking.
Yeah,
like
I'm confusing drop-in and slide-in.
It's not here. Like they don't drop in here like other like longer glass has. It's actually on the back of the lens, where you can. It was explained to me that you like can cut film and then like this type of like ND film.
TJ, if you can switch to my screen, I have a picture of it up.
Oh, perfect. Here we go. So, yep. So it kind of slides into that little holder, that little film. And, we're investigating the possibility of starting to carry this because there is a Sigma lens that has a similar drop-in feature that you don't have to have like a big contraption on the front of the lens. A lot of times what cameras will do is they'll have like a way that you like twist to hold it onto the end of the element in order to get filters large enough to cover that. I know Nissy has some great products and other brands, but with this one, it looks like, I mean, this to me seems like it would be so much easier, but you also don't get, polarizing. You don't get, neutral grads as far as I know. There's not really a good way to do that. So it'll be interesting to see if other manufacturers, do come out with something um, that will, kind of bolt on there. Question is that the same filters as the Sigma? Not the same, and Eeyore can correct me here because he knows a lot more about this. Not the same, but similar in that you like cut film and then pop them in there. There also might be third party. I mean, I could see a Polar Pro, coming out with something that's already pre-made that's easy just to buy off the shelf to slide in there, or other manufacturers. But again, time will tell on that one. Also, just circling back, the new grip from Canon will work on the R5 and R6. No more dedicated grip for each and every model. That is super nice.
Yep.
So thanks for throwing that in there and reminding people. It is kind of a standardized grip, as with a lot of the features. A lot of the features were the standard in the R5 and the R6. So
Yeah.
it's
The
good to see.
interesting thing for that from our discussion last week, where I said that cameras more and more are just computers with image sensors and a lens mount on them, the R5 and the R6 have the same CPU, the same Digic X processor. So other than the sensor and things that are tied to the sensor, and I'm assuming like the electronics around the shutter, everything else should be able to be equivalent between those two cameras.
Absolutely. I don't want to make this a Canon show. I'm going to try not
Yeah,
to.
sorry. I'm backing away from the Canon.
I know, I'm the same. So, interesting. This came out. Okay, so I want to back up a little bit. This app has been in the App Store for like 2 weeks. So, this is the Profoto app that allows you to use your phone, iPhone only at this time, in order to trigger your B10 line of products. So, up until this point, it kind of worked in that it would like pulse the modeling light a little bit, but now they're actually using the flash tube. So this weekend when I went to visit my wife, her friend's boyfriend was out there as well. So I was like, hey, this is gonna sound random. I swear I'm a real photographer, but I need to use my phone for this. And they're like, okay, let's go. So it was a little bit lighter. I was hoping to go out like during the day and seeing about like high speed sync and stuff, but I didn't get a chance to. But we did get a couple photos. And it was really good. I mean, it worked okay. There was a little bit of lag with the app. But again, this is kind of their version 1, and a couple of questions that I got, can you use portrait mode? And it's not yet. So you're actually using the camera within Photos app. You're not using just the standard just the standard camera app. You're using their own. Also, you shot a little bit with it as well for the blog, correct?
I did. And what I originally switched to Profoto flashes in part because of the way they originally advertised this feature. I thought it would be what it is now. So I was thrilled when this suddenly showed up in my app last week with a firmware update. And what it lets me do is, you can see on the left there, my setup where I've got my flash and my deviled eggs that I'm taking a picture of. And the picture in the middle is the one from my real camera, my Fuji X-T4. But then I can just take my phone out and quickly snap a vertical for Instagram or Facebook or wherever, if I want to do process shots live while I'm working that I want to share on social media. And it was, like you said, there's a little bit of a pause. In my case, you can see in the first picture that the modeling light on the B10 is on. The modeling light shut itself off. There was a little bit of a pause, and then the flash fired, and then the modeling light came back on. So it lets me use my real studio flashes with my iPhone and get good light with it. And that's something that I've tried in the past using continuous lights, and I could never get lighting. I mean, even with their first cut at it, I never got lighting that was as good as this for my phone.
And I think the even bigger thing here is just the talk about using an electronic shutter. So there's not, to my knowledge, there's no way to do silent shooting with, Sony, Panasonic, Fuji, any brand that I know of. You can't use the electronic shutter. It seems here that Profoto's figured out how to do that. Now they're in full control of everything. So I think some of that lag has to do with that, with timing of the sensor and making sure, with the focal planes, or the um, focal plane shutter, that it's, the first curtain, second curtain. But it's interesting because this is an electronic shutter. To my knowledge, I'm pretty sure there's not a mechanical shutter in my iPhone. But does this mean that they are now going to be able to start, with their TTL line of product to, time it just right and actually use silent shooting? So now at weddings and, other events where it has to be quiet, you can now use that electronic shutter.
Yeah, that's an excellent question. And the one other limitation to the app that I wish it had is it doesn't have TTL for your phone. I use Profoto's TTL all the time because it's so good at giving me the base exposure I need. And in the app, it was simple for me to adjust my camera's phone to match what my phone's camera to match what my real camera said, so that the lighting matched up. But that's one thing that I'm hoping they'll have in an update is real TTL metering.
Yeah. And I think they did talk about that
Yeah.
as part of the press release as something that will be coming, that, and I think Android development. But again, it works really well. I mean, shockingly well as far as connection. Always get like, maybe it's just my luck with, Bluetooth connections and Wi-Fi connections with cameras.
Yeah.
But it's always kind of a hassle. And even like my whole home is like smart home because I'm a tech geeky guy like that. And I always
Right.
have to like repair my Google Homes. And I swear that the normal consumer does not have this many problems with it. That's what I fully expected when I took this out, was like, I'm going to have issues. Like, it's new, it's glitchy. And no, like as soon as I turned it on, it was like, boom, Bluetooth, this is your light. This is what you're controlling. It works really, really well. So hats off to the Swedes with this one. Their developers are top notch because, again, for me, it was flawless. And I was actually out on July 4th, the night of July 4th, like, and we were trying to get like the burst behind them. So I was just smashing that button as fast as it would go, just to like freeze that action and get the, fireworks behind them. And it was just right there with me. I mean, it was just snapping pictures away. And, obviously I overshot, but, it didn't shut down. It didn't come unpaired. I even used multiple lights at one point, and it was flawless. So very cool for Profoto to add that. No cost. It's just a firmware update that, is out for the devices. So moving right along, Sue announces their 35 millimeter 1.8, 1.33 times anamorphic lens is on the way. So a couple weeks ago, I did get a chance to play with their, I want to say, female anamorphic that's on the market. And it was super fun. So it's anamorphic is where everything's kind of squeezed into an hole. You get really cool lens flare. It's ultra wide. Cameras like the GH5 can actually de-squeeze that so it looks more normal. Because what you're doing is you're getting this weird like squeezed image, and then when you bring that footage into Premiere or Final Cut, you de-squeeze it, and use that proper aspect ratio. But who is this for? Well, anamorphic lenses right now are just super expensive. I mean, tens of thousands of dollars for good quality ones. Now, SLR Magic and other brands, and like Sue here, they're bringing more affordable, options for people, for creators that are maybe smaller budget, to still get that type of look, whether that's for, a creative movie that they're doing, a documentary, whatever it is. It's allowing creators to, attain these lenses. They're making them more attainable. So hats off to Sue for, putting this out there. And if it's anything like the 50, the quality is good as far as the build quality. It's not going to be a $10,000 lens. I mean, this is, very specific use case. But it's going to be, I mean, for the price that they're offering it at, it's going to be, it's going to be a very good lens, good build quality, super great stuff. So cool for them to, kind of push the envelope for just different lens designs. So this is something that we are both using right now. This is the X Webcam now for Mac. So hats off to Fuji for, again, listening to users and giving us a product that, especially when there's more Zoom calls, there's more web conferencing, there's more live streaming going on than ever before. Now allowing us Mac users to use the software. Mac's or PC is the easy one. That architecture's been around for a long time, and they've been developing on that for a long time. So it's awesome to see them bring it to the Mac, and knock on wood, it's been working well so far. Now, you,
Yeah.
on the other hand, you had some issues, and I'm going to let you talk about this because you are our resident Fuji expert. So tell us your thoughts so far with it.
Yeah. So not to knock it too much, it is working great, as you are probably seeing right now. The only problem I had with it was, well, two things. First is once I plug it into my Mac, I can't change any of my settings anymore. When I go through the capture, the HDMI capture card, the Cam-Fi or whatever it's called, I can reach up and use my wonderful Fuji knobs and dials to adjust shutter and aperture and ISO and all that stuff to dial in my exposure. With this software, once I plug it in, it's locked, and I have to unplug to adjust things. Now, Chris Gilbert, our friendly local Fuji tech rep, chimed in and said, in Zoom, if you're using Zoom with it, you can disconnect the camera within Zoom. Tell it to disconnect camera, and then you can adjust things and click that button in the software again and turn the camera back on. But that's not working with StreamYard, the streaming software we're using. I can turn the camera on and off, and it's still stuck with what I had before. Not the end of the world. Once I got everything dialed in, it's fine. Just would have been nice to be able to dial it in live while I'm seeing things, because it seems like the exposure is just slightly different between what I see on my viewfinder and what it shows over here on my computer. The other downside is you lose USB charging while you're doing this. When I was plugging into my HDMI port, I could plug into USB-C and keep charging the camera. So I could film as long as I had Fuji compatible USB-C batteries. Now it doesn't seem to be charging mine. I don't see the little lightning bolt to show it, but it sounds like you're having a different experience.
Yeah, so the XT3 that I grabbed from the store, you are confirmed that it was, there was plug-in power.
Okay.
So it seems to be charging the XT3. It hasn't died yet, so
Yep.
I guess that's good.
Yeah, I got my battery grip, and it says I got plenty of battery to go, so no worries on my end. But yeah, no, I'm grateful that Fuji keeps supporting the Mac, because I'm a Mac user, and it makes my life much easier.
And we did have a question come in for the Pro Photo. No, it does not work on Android at this time. So,
Yeah, but they're working.
I think I do have a sad trombone. There we go.
Oh.
Yes, so it is not working with that. So again, we have a ton of news, and we're coming up to the end of the show, but we did want to give credit where credit is due, in that Nikon has officially dropped the master and slave terms. But this was something that, again, happened, like 15 years ago. So we did talk about Canon, how they had done it a little while ago as well. But Nikon has dropped these terms as well. So I think this is something that we're just going to see from all manufacturers. Hopefully, Pro Photo and Godox and insert camera brand here does follow suit with that. So I think that is a good thing that's happening.
Good for Nikon.
So this one was interesting. So Sakonic says the L858 communicates with strobes via wireless module next to the battery compartment. Currently, we only have a module for Pocket Wizard, Elinchrom, and Photox. Godox will be released later this year. Bum, bum, bum. So what is the use case for this? So when I had my studio, I used Elinchrom, and I used the 800 series meter, and it was great. So what I could do is I could walk up, and I could, boom, with one button, trigger, dial in my lights. I could actually control the power of the lights right from the light meter. So I could give myself a little bit more, a little bit less, and it just speeds up the process so much. It's just so much faster. So if you're using a meter in the studio, what you would have to do is you would have to hold your trigger in one hand and your meter in the other hand, and you'd hit the record button on the light meter, and then you'd hit your trigger button, and then you would walk over to the light. You'd go up or down a little bit to kind of dial everything in. And now, what they're doing is they're allowing it's basically like this little plug-in, almost like a little USB that plugs into that meter. And now it's going to work with Godox. So this is super interesting to me. So number one, Elinchrom and Photox are, they're in the similar distribution channel as Sakonic. Like, they're all done by Mac Group here in the US. Godox is a competitor to that. So now we're seeing them support something that's outside of basically supporting their competition. So I think it's awesome that they are kind of reaching across the aisle, if you will. If this does come soon, if this is a real thing, like this is the only announcement we have is a Facebook post. But I think it's good news for Godox shooters who shoot in studio. Like for me, I'm not really a TTL shooter in studio in that I dial it in, and it just makes my life a lot easier. So with this, like, it just, again, saves time. Time is money. So awesome for Sakonic if that does come true. I guess that should have been in the rumors, but it was kind of confirmed. So I don't know.
Yeah, well, if they're announcing it, that's
Right. So this one was interesting. GoPro just released a free app that turns your Hero 8 into a webcam. So if you are wanting to do an ultra wide live cast, which in this case, I mean, they actually have a pretty good example of, a woman that has what looks like a very small apartment and she is teaching yoga.
oh
So,
my goodness, and a large amount of flexibility. I would kill
exactly.
myself if I tried to do that.
Yeah, I'd be broken. So, in this case, it works really well, but this does open up for more creative uses or necessity. So, it's kind of 50-50 with tools that come out like this. Like for Fuji, it came for necessity because you couldn't find the HDMI capture devices, especially at the beginning of the pandemic. Um, with GoPro, I just see a lot of cool opportunities for live streams to now use these. So I could see House of Worship, putting one of these inside of a drum cage, and being able to get that really cool point of view.
Ooh.
Anything where there is, any type of weird place that you couldn't fit a full size camera into. Let's say we wanted to do, cameras and coffee, where you and I would drive around the city and we wanted to do this show on the road. What now we can have a GoPro up in there where it's a very tight quarters that we could then do our live stream. So, to me, I think it's two things. I think it is based on a necessity, but I think it's also going to open up some creative opportunities for people. Just wanted to update everybody. I think we talked a little bit about this, that the 1DX Mark II actually scored higher than the Mark III, and I was uber excited for this because I have the 1DX Mark II, is what the camera that I shoot with, and then this came out. A little bit of a retraction in which it was a software bug that reads the raw files. So they have some proprietary files that look at or proprietary software that looks at those files. And in the 10 plus years of testing, they had never seen this issue before. Was an issue. It came out that the new sensor from Canon is actually a lot better than the Mark II. So I'm sad. I do not have the best sensor in the 1DX line. Let's go ahead and
Well,
cue that,
sorry, TJ.
sad panda.
But this is good news for the R6 that we were talking about because it's the same sensor. And the thing about this sensor is when they retested it, it has as good, if not slightly better, dynamic range than the current top of the line Sonys and Nikons. And that has always been the knock against Canon sensors, is that they have good colors, but they're always a stop or two less on the dynamic range. So if you need to really pull something out of the shadows or the highlights, you'd probably be better off with a Sony or a Nikon. In part because Nikon sensors are made by Sony, but that's a digression. This seems to point towards the R6, and I'm assuming the R5. Canon's fixed this, and they've got the extended dynamic range that everybody else has out there now. So this is good news for Sony. But we're trying not to make this an entirely Sony podcast, so I'm going to stop talking.
Good news for Canon, not a Canon podcast. Not a Canon.
Oh, I keep switching those. Canon is pushing stuff forward so much that I always think Sony and who's pushing the market forward, and Canon has jumped them, and I can't get that straight in my head.
So this was a funny video that you had shared. This is how to cure gas or gear acquisition syndrome. So do yourself a favor and head over to, actually, if you just do a YouTube search for the Northrup's gear gas syndrome or cure for gas,
right?
GAS. It's kind of a parody bit where it looks like one of the late night commercials that you see on TV for everything from, I don't know, any insert whatever medical pills that are, on TV. It's in that kind of light, and it's actually a pretty funny video. So, hats off to the Northrups, who often find themselves in controversy, especially as of late. But they did put together a pretty funny video. So definitely go and watch that. pretty fun.
Yeah. And I know I need to be reminded that gear acquisition syndrome can be conquered, especially when we have big announcement weeks like this.
Yes, exactly. Just take some time, think about it, and how's it going to solve the problem for you? And
Step
very
away from the
interesting.
credit card.
Yes, it is. So something that is not going to cost you any money at all, and not really any other, unless you don't have an aquarium, is this tutorial from F-Stoppers in which you can shoot underwater with a fish tank. And I feel like I've seen this in other places before, but I never really think about it. And a friend of mine, Isaac Coffee of Coffee Creations, he does a thing
Mm.
every summer with his seniors where they do like a whole underwater, I think they call it splash week, and he
Wow.
does a ton of underwater portraiture, but he gets the housing for the camera and like he's in the pool the whole day, shooting these things, where in this tutorial it's just something very simple in that he's just using an aquarium. It's basically a very large enclosure for the camera. But we were talking a little bit pre-show, like,
Hmm.
does that make you feel kind of, unsteady, putting your expensive camera in there? And we were talking, it's like, well, that's the only job an aquarium has, is to keep water in. So like I feel like it would do the same thing, keeping water out. So this is something I do want to try with my nieces and nephews, one of these weekends coming up, just get some cool underwater photos, different perspectives for them. And you see a lot of this similar look for surf photographers, but this kind of opens it up for if you do go out to the beach, to get just kind of some cool different looks, whether that's kayaking, paddleboarding. Obviously you have to take a big aquarium out, but the aquarium doesn't have to be this large either. I mean, you can go with a smaller aquarium to get those. So we did have a couple of things come in here. I wonder if the software bug was discovered after a mysterious Venmo payment from Mr. Canon. A little Mavban is a conspiracy theorist, I see. But I would say, I mean, if I were Canon, I'd be like, hey, bro, like, this is a really good sensor, and like we've done our tests, and like you're hurting this camera. Like, we're about to release this other camera that's gonna have the same sensor. Like, are you sure? Like, are you sure that your tests are right? And they found, sure enough, that there was an issue. Last question: is Micro Four Thirds dead? Oh, this isn't the Tony Show. Sorry. Yeah, that's what they keep getting into the some of their titles can be a little clickbaity. Not gonna lie, a little clickbaity. But yes, they're constantly saying Micro Four Thirds is dead. So little homage to them. So if you are looking for any of these tutorials that we do, or the any live streams that we've done here at the store, you can actually go over to our YouTube channel and go to youtube.com/the Pixel Connection. You'll see all the live streams that we've done, as long as they haven't gotten taken down for copyright infringement. They will all be there. So we're
It
starting to
was
create
just
some
the
playlists
ones.
and stuff. Yeah, I think there was just the one that was taken down, which is good. So let's jump over to the rumor roundup. I need to get like a Bonanza theme song or something for this one. So breaking: new Nikon Z6S and Nikon Z7S mirrorless cameras expected later this year. So what are your thoughts on this? You think Nikon can compete with these announcements that came out from Canon?
It doesn't feel well. These are good. This is good news if you're a Nikon shooter, because they're plugging some of the obvious problems they had with the Z6 and the Z7. My understanding is it's the same sensors and the same processors, but they will have dual card slots. They will have battery grips that function as a vertical grip, so they will have a shutter and dials on them, which just felt like obvious misses. And kind of like we were saying earlier, that the Canon R was rushed in, it felt like Nikon rushed these in. Not quite as bad as Canon did, but they're cleaning up their mistakes with the 6S and the 7S. And I think this will keep those cameras competitive for a while longer. It's good to see Nikon's trying to keep up here.
Yeah, and I think that they're on the right track. I mean, some of their lenses, being, especially that wide angle, being, smaller, compact, lightweight, ergonomically, they feel fine. But we just haven't seen like a mass adoption, where we have seen that with, you know, a lot of people switching over to Sony, or, going into the Canon, even compared to EOS R sales and RP sales, we see
Mm-hmm.
a lot more of that than the Nikon stuff. So it'll be interesting. Nikon's in an interesting place in that they don't, kind of a lot of their eggs are in this basket, Whereas
Hmm.
Canon, they have the high-end video, they have cinema glass, they have printers, they have, they have a lot of different places to go. Even like, Olympus before, they got sold off, they had the medical division and the, imaging division. You have Panasonic who has Micro Four Thirds full frame, but also, they're an electronics company, so they have everything from, battery technology to, the Wi-Fi in planes. They have something to fall back on, where Nikon's just kind of on their own. They don't have a high-end video division. They don't have printers. They are the only company that I can think of that is just focused on nothing but cameras, which is a lot of risk. I mean, they
Yep.
have to, if they mess up, they can't just borrow some money from the printer division. You know what I mean? That was super profitable this year. So it'll be
Yep.
interesting to see how Nikon weathers this storm, especially with, if you read any of the, reports of, purchasing right now. Obviously, it's coming to a screeching halt with the pandemic. So is it
Yep.
something that they're going to be able to make it through? I hope so. I really do hope so. We have a lot of Nikon shooters here, albeit mostly traditional lensed cameras. Uh, and I do want to see them keep going. I mean, they've been in this industry, for a very long time. So I do hope that they, keep on putting out new cameras.
Yeah, I want to add one more thing to that. So
Yep.
this is where I think Canon was smart. Uh, as Torbjorn said, their lenses are really expensive, but I've seen them almost as much as marketing tools. Having that f1.2 glass, having that f2 28 to 70 zoom gets people excited about Canon's RF
Mhm.
mount and RF cameras. Nikon did the opposite, where most of their lenses are smaller, affordable, high quality lenses, but the 1.8s, they don't seem to get people as excited. And like you, I mean, Nikon's a legendary name. I want
Sure.
them to stay around, and it feels like they're starting to come out with the good lenses that will help them with that. But I have to wonder if maybe marketing wise, they didn't quite stick the lenses the way Canon did, and that's part of why they're hurting.
Yeah, and I mean, this kind of transitions into the next thing here. Fuji's coming out with a 50 mil f 1.0. I'm pretty sure it's going to have autofocus, whereas the Nikon,
Yep.
like the Noct, it was a 0.95, but
Right.
no autofocus. So,
Yes.
if you did want to even shoot with that lens, which 0.95, I mean, come on, like it's going to be out of focus, like right here. But even if you did want to attract people, with those lenses, like there was no autofocus with it. Whereas, Fuji now is like, boom, F1, we got this, hold my beer. Like, and yeah, it'll even autofocus and hopefully it'll autofocus really well.
Yep.
And for $1,500, so I haven't really priced personally, as, me putting on my, photographer hat or, business owner hat. How is that $1,500? Is that a lot for a Fuji lens, or is that about in line with?
That is a lot for a Fuji lens, but it's not the most expensive. So they're most expensive off. Well, they have the $5,000 ish 300 f2, but for most of their main line of lenses, that will be the most expensive prime. But I'm a Fuji shooter. I've been waiting for this lens. Gear acquisition syndrome is strong for me in this one. I've got my gimme hands out. Come on, give it to me. I want it. And I've been assuming I need $2,000 US put aside for this lens. That's what they're going to ask for. And so this rumor has me hoping, oh, maybe I don't need quite as much money as I thought I did. So it's high for their lenses, but it's not out of range for their lenses, especially for a trophy lens like this, f1.0 and autofocus. There is no other autofocus f1 lens out. They're all manual focus. I think Canon had one that they released back in the 80s, maybe 90s for the EF mount, but it's out of print. Basically, they don't make them anymore. So when Fuji releases this, it'll be the only f1 autofocus lens. Now, of course, this is on a crop sensor, so that really translates to like f1.4, f1.5. But this is the range.
Still, yeah,
Yeah, this is the focal range I use every day for my food photography, and I'm looking at it and I am drooling.
absolutely.
Come on, Fuji, give it
Just
to
like
me.
your
I want
just like your food photography always has me drooling.
it.
So if you are a Fuji shooter, we did want to do a quick shout out to the Ohio Fujifam Facebook group started up a couple weeks ago, where basically it's all things Fuji, and we're doing weekly contests with some awesome giveaways coming soon. So definitely join and just do a search on Facebook for Ohio Fujifam, even if you're not from Ohio, that's fine. We'll let you in as long as you pledge your allegiance to the Ohio State University. It's totally fine. We have this whole process where you have to say how bad Michigan is. We'll get you up to speed on what it's like to be an Ohioan, I promise. But come on in, join us where we can all share our Fuji love, our Fuji photos, and get help. So there are some Fuji tech reps in there. Some of the Fuji ambassadors are also part of that group. So, we just wanted to create a community for all of the Fuji shooters that are out there. Also want to let you know that we are doing free Fuji rentals through the month of July. Yes, free as in free beer. So they say there's no such thing as a free lunch, but that is not true with this program. The only catch is you have to put a deposit down and you get that back. So then it still ends up being free. But we have X Pro 3s, we have the X100Vs, we have long lenses, prime lenses, zoom lenses, all the lenses. I mean, not really all the lenses, almost all the lenses actually. But those are available for free. So we're also doing free weekend rentals. So if you want to pick up an XT3 for the weekend, stop by Friday, drop it back off Monday, definitely take advantage of that. We're also doing some extra savings when you do Fuji Tech Time, which you had done a couple weeks ago. So basically you just get on the phone with a Fuji Tech and you get your questions answered, and then you get extra bonuses that are only available to people that join those calls. Like we can't even, let's say you come in and you're like, I want to save some more money. We can't do that unless you call. Like you have to call, talk to the tech rep, and get your questions answered in order to do that. Another opportunity.
Give you a coupon code to use.
Absolutely. So I wanted to let you know a little bit about Pixel Photo Fest. We are 5 days away from the schedule being announced, and this is going to be a hybrid conference. So if you are, in Sweden, if you're in Texas, you can still take advantage of this conference. So from about 8 o'clock in the morning till 5 o'clock at night, we're going to have multiple rooms going with some of the best photographers in the industry. We've got Brian Manier, we have Scott Robert Lim, we have there's this whole lineup of speakers, Peter Baumgarten, some awesome Meg Lokes, Michelle from Sigma. There's just a ton of speakers, and we actually just added 5 more last week. So we are constantly adding speakers to this. And at 5 o'clock, if you are local, you can actually meet downtown. We're doing a hands-on photographing models, a hands-on event photographing models in the vaults in the 9, which is, it was an old bank. So there's these old, antiques that are there. We're going to be photographing down there. We're going to have a ton of lights and a model bank. It's going to be awesome. And then we have access to the rooftop bar for just kind of a chill, relaxing summer evening in Cleveland. So you definitely want to take advantage of that. If you go over to the website, just do a Google search for Pixel Photo Fest. You'll be able to find that listed on our website. So if you do want the slides from today, you can reach out via email at social@thepixelconnection.com. Just message us through Instagram, anywhere. Or if you are on our mailing list, we do send out all of these slides with the links. We send that out every Friday at 6. If you do need those, you can absolutely reach out. So let's see real quick. Yep, Formula One teams, but for camera, absolutely. Can you send the 200mm f2 to Sweden for free? I'm sorry, we are not able to do that. I wish.
They won't even send it to me down here in Copley, so I have to go up there.
And Matt, thumbs down to the whole Big Ten. Love seeing my TCU Horned Frogs beat the Big Ten champ Badgers in the 2010 Rose Bowl. Yeah, and I think I saw on ESPN they actually replayed some of that, some of the older bowl games. So yes, not an Ohio State or Big Ten fan there in the Mav fan.
Well, Mav fan, at least you're not an SEC guy.
Excellent. Well, thank you so much, everybody, for joining. And where can people find you, Mr. Dad Cooks Dinner?
Look for me at dadcooksdinner.com, my food blog, or at Dad Cooks Dinner on most of the socials.
Excellent. And if you need anything from us, you can find us on Instagram, the.pixel connection, or just do a Google search on any of the social media networks for the Pixel Connection. So thank you, everybody, so much for watching. And if you need absolutely anything, please feel free to reach out. That is another Friday Focus. We got to figure out something cool to sign off, like Leo Laporte does, like a Mac break weekly, this quits in the can, or break time zone. We got to come up with something cool.
Yep, so we do.
It's time to focus on the weekend. I hope you have an awesome one. Thanks for joining, everybody.
Bye, everybody.